Why North Korea hates the USA. How North Korean is still around. Endless tension, a war that could have been prevented. A dictator who has no intention of leaving power. And a totally subjugated country that has no internet. It's no secret that relations between the United States and North Korea aren't the best, and probably never will be. The reason? North Korea has not forgiven the United States for supporting South Korea in the war that split the nation in two. Hello friends, how are you doing? Welcome back to channel. Do you think North Korea had a very strong reason to hate him so much? Is reconciliation possible? Before you think about all that, you'll be amazed at all the history behind it. Subscribe to the channel and stay tuned to find out what's going on between these two countries. Korea and Japan. Long before the time of the conflict between the two Koreas, the Koreas existed as one nation, and the citizens were ruled under one empire. In 1910, Japan annexed Korea to its territory and became part of it for 35 years. In 1945, after the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and a series of invasions in Asian territory that caused a wave of destruction, Japan decided to surrender to the Allied forces on August 15th of that year. The Soviet Union and Americans arrived in Japan only after its surrender in 1945, and in Korea exactly 1 month later. As a result of the negotiation for Japan's surrender and withdrawal, the two powers decided to temporarily divide Korea into two occupation zones. One in the north, the Communist Democratic People's Republic of North Korea, supported by the Soviet Union and ruled by Kim Il-sung, and one in the south, the Democratic Republic of Korea, supported by the United States and ruled by Syngman Rhee. Colonel Dean Rusk, who was in charge of the U.S. mission, proposed that the division be made at the 38th parallel, and so it was final. However, both North and South Korea claimed to be the sole legitimate government of all of Korea, and neither accepted the border as permanent. The war between the Koreas. Eventually, North Korea, armed with Soviet weapons, took the initiative to invade South Korea, and on June 25, 1950, the conflict between the two Koreas began again. The invasion caused the United Nations, led by the US, to intervene the intervention of the United Nations, led by the United States, in support of the South, led to a surge that lasted 3 years and left millions for North Korea dead and wounded. At first, the United Nations command forces quickly made their way through the entire North Korea and into the border of. China felt pressure to support North Korea and stop the surge. In response, then President Harry Truman responded by sending U.S. warships to the city of Taipei, Taiwan, territory China deemed theirs at the time. Eventually, President Eisenhower traveled to Korea to try to find a solution to the conflict. On July 27, 1953, an armistice was signed and the aggressions of both sides ceased. However, no peace treaty was ever signed. A heavily guarded demilitarized zone, DMZ, still divides the peninsula, and an anti-communist and anti-North Korea sentiment remains in South Korea. Since the war, the United States has maintained a strong military presence in the South, which is depicted by the North Korean government as an imperialist occupation force. When the North Koreans were pushed back to the Chinese border in October 1950, the Communist China had no choice but to shift from offensive war preparation against Taiwan to resisting America and protecting the homeland. By 1971, Taiwan was officially recognized by the UN, separate from China. Due to Chinese financial and trade support effectively facilitating North Korea's nuclear program by keeping its economy afloat, and the United States and part of the UN continuing to recognize Taiwan as a country independent from China. A unified peninsula drifting into the United States' arms is impossible and would break the strategic balance in the region. From Chinese perspective, at the minimum, China would demand a neutral Korea hence. A divided peninsula still remains optimal for Chinese interests to this day. China's primary strategic concern is to keep the peninsula out of US control.